Hello, everybody. Welcome into SportsDay Insider, presented by the Dallas Morning News. I am Kevin Sherrington, joined by my pals Evan Grant and David Moore. Fellas, we're what, a couple of days removed from the mushroom cloud over Jerry World when the Lions blew up the Cowboys. What a game that was! Tied for the fifth worst loss in Cowboys history, 38 points. Last time they did that, 2010. Of course, that was the game against the Green Bay Packers, after which Jerry Jones fired his head coach, Wade Phillips, and installed Jason Garrett, his professed Tom Landry heir, as the head coach. David, you wrote today that was probably not going to happen this time. And I think that on Jerry Jones' radio show, he said the same thing. Can you tell us exactly what happened on his radio show?
Yeah, and all of these are important to say at this moment, right? Because if you have two or three more results like you had against Detroit, even if you don't want to make a move, you're probably going to make one. There does come to be a point of no return, but they're not there yet, and that's not the intention with this team. And what I pointed out was, and this is the difference. That is the only year in Jerry Jones' ownership that he has made a coaching change in season. That was 2010 with Wade Phillips. A lot of people say, well, this is starting to look like that. Well, not yet, and here are the differences. That team started 1-7 when Wade was fired. This team is 3-3 in a again, it appears a division that is still up for grabs, very much so. Two, that team had lost its starting quarterback to a broken clavicle. Tony Romo was gone for the season with a broken clavicle when they were 1-7 and a coaching change was made. Dak Prescott is healthy. Now, we may talk later in the segment about how well he's playing or not, but he is healthy. And you've seen what he can do in this system last year. And the biggest one to me is the heir apparent was already in place. Jason Garrett was hired as offensive coordinator before Jerry hired Wade Phillips as the head coach. And the understanding was always that Wade was basically the caretaker of the franchise until Jerry turned it over to Jason Garrett, who he hoped Jason would be his Tom Landry, which he publicly professed. So the heir apparent was in place. If you move on from Mike McCarthy, who's in the final year of his deal, and everyone on this staff is in the final year of their deal, who do you turn it over? Do you turn it over to Mike Zimmer, who has head coaching experience the way this defense is played? Do you turn it over to Brian Schottenheimer? And again, this offense is only averaging 16.3 points over the last three games. Do you turn it over to the special teams coach? Do you turn it over to Al Harris, the assistant head coach? You could make an argument for that. But how excited would Al Harris be to take a job knowing he has no chance to be the full-time head coach? And he's not going to be on the next staff that comes in anyway. So this is the fact the entire staff is on the final year of their deal and there's no one in place to turn it over to, I think factors into this. Jerry Jones set up this dynamic, and it would have to be a dramatic fall, even worse than what it is now, for him to make a change in season.
I think the only change he says he's going to make in season is on his flagship radio program of the guy who asked that question, are you going to fire your head coach?
Well, apparently,
it's a valid question. I mean, it's a topical question right now because the instinct is do something. I think David makes a great point, though. The difference is when you brought in Jason Garrett and you had an heir apparent, there was a reason to give him those 8 games or 9 games that year to give him a head start on all the real live action of being a head coach, as opposed to having to learn that on the fly when it mattered. There isn't anybody in place right now. And if you do fire him, you are completely giving up on the season without I mean, my question would be, David, what's there to rescue from this season? What would you use the last 10 games of the season or 11 games of the season to try and figure out? There wouldn't be anything to figure out. It would be just a complete white flag.
Yeah. And again, do you completely dismiss that the nucleus and the same players of 3 straight 12-5 teams are still in place and the coaching staff that got you there? Do you just throw that out after 6 games and a 500 start? So, no, I think they've, by their performance in the previous 3 years, I think this group has bought themselves a little bit more time to, see what they can do if they can pull out of this. All of that being said, a lot of the things we pointed to in the offseason that the club didn't do, and Kevin, you brought up on the radio show today, I think Jerry got a little sensitive about his role and how he's culpable and where this team is now. And as I wrote today, look, there's no question they were more concerned with shedding salary than they were upgrading specific positions in the offseason through free agency. And draft and develop, you hear that constantly. And I do believe that is the best way to go. But it's not a panacea that allows you to hide and say, well, we're not going to address other needs because we're a draft and develop team. And that's, I think, what they kind of fell into this offseason. They threw out we're draft and develop. These young guys just have to step up. Well, I'll tell you what, at this point of the season, Dallas has devoted more snaps on the offensive and defensive side of the ball to first-year players than any other team in the league. And look at where they are. Look how inconsistent they are. And that's a big reason for it.
But that's all that's well and good, except that the only thing anybody remembers that Jerry said all offseason was we're all in on 2024. And so the culpability lies with him. You make that kind of statement, then people expect results. I don't care how much you backtrack off of it. I don't care how much you try and explain whatever it was you were trying to say. You've set the tone there. And you can't, I don't care if he wants to fire the talk show hosts on his flagship station, fine, but you can't get sensitive over the fact that you bear the ultimate responsibility for what this team is, and you've set up false expectations with the we're all in.
Exactly. And yeah, the only people who are all in, let's be clear, the only people who are all in is the coaching staff. Those are the only group of people who are all in. Dak Prescott got his extension. CeeDee Lamb got his extension. Micah Parsons will at some point. I mean, the coaching staff is the only one that's all in on this season, and their necks are on the line. And you're exactly right. It's interesting because I also in the offseason I made the comment that I'd always thought, well, Jerry said things that inflame people and whatever. I always thought I thought he did a pretty good job in large part gauging the public sentiment and the way the wind was blowing. And right around draft time when he said like all in 17 times in a press conference or whatever, I remember writing about how this was like, I never remember the public Jerry since his early days being this tone deaf. The post Jimmy Jerry blow up, Jerry Jones was someone I wasn't recognizing this off season with him doubling down on statements. This was the Jerry Jones in the past after making that statement, just going, well, I say stupid things, this is what it is. But then just like double down, triple down on it. And I wrote about how he was, unusually tone deaf. And he started his next press conference the next day going, well, I know some of you in here think I'm tone deaf. And made a joke of it that day, but then he got back into the whole thing again.
I agree with David. I was shocked this year to see Jerry not understand the mounting concern in the public and the fan base this year, and it made me wonder if he's become a little too insulated and doesn't understand it, because that is the one thing he's always had his finger on the pulse of the public and what they want to do. I want to go over now though, so we get some of these things we think are part of the problem here, because there were a couple of things. One that I want us to talk about was Tom Brady's comments during the broadcast when he said that they need to get tougher physically and mentally. which is a real indictment. I mean, there's not really much else you can say about a team, or certainly not much you can say worse than to say that they quit. He didn't say they quit, although I could say that Trayvon Diggs quit on tackling David Montgomery.
I think we can all say that. There's some physical evidence to support that stance.
Yes, and so that looked bad, certainly. But I want to look at something here in the offensive line, because I listened to Nate Newton on Channel 21 after the game, and of course he was a great guard for the Cowboys in their heyday, and I certainly respect his opinion on offensive lines. And he believes that that's the root of all the Cowboys' problems. That certainly in the game against the Lions, they couldn't run the ball, they couldn't protect Dak. Dak's throwing off his back foot a lot of times in that game. Although the first interception he threw in the end zone, he had plenty of time and just didn't recognize the coverage on that play. So that was all on Dak on that throw. But if we look across the offensive line here, we see, as you talked about, David, they have one of the youngest offensive lines in the league. They are certainly giving the rookies a lot of playing time here. They got a rookie at left tackle in Tyler Guyton. They've got a rookie at center in Connor Beebe. Tyler Guyton, according to Pro Football Focus, is the 70th rated tackle with a grade of 49.7. To give you an idea of what that means, that sounds like one of Evan's test scores from high school, 49.7.
Take exception to that, Evan.
Yeah. He
is very smart.
Yeah. Penei Sewell, the great offensive tackle for the Lions, for instance, who almost scored himself a touchdown in that game. He has a score of 89.2, which is, almost double Tyler Guyton's. Now, look, I'm not saying that Tyler Guyton has to be Penei Sewell, but that's a significant difference when you're getting that kind of production out of one offensive left tackle over another left tackle.
Yeah,
also,
you didn't
Connor
even mention
Beebe,
he's the most penalized left tackle in the league either.
Yes, he is. He
even while missing a game, even while missing this last game,
he does a lot of reaching. Remember when Phil Posderick came back for that
holding 75 or what?
When he came back and when he ran on the field, he threw a flag. I thought that was really great. A great touch by Phil Posderick. I think that's what Tyler got. Maybe we should call him that. Maybe that should be his nickname, Flag. But anyway, Connor Beebe's is a 29th rated center. That puts him in the bottom third of the league at 55.5. Those are the two lowest rated offensive linemen for the Cowboys. Terrence Steele's having a good year. He's a 46th rated tackle at 63.7. I take that back. Of course, Tyler Smith is the best rated. He is the 10th rated guard, 75.5. Zach Martin is the 25th at 68.1. They're still good at guard, but not as good as they were. Zach Martin has gone from a score of 20 in 2021 of 93.4. That's what he was rated after the year was over. He has slid now to 68.1. And
this Detroit game may have been Zach Martin's worst game of his career. He was. Yeah. I know we're talking about the young guys, and there's certainly need for improvement there. And I'll tell you, Tyler Guyton was an interesting situation because he practiced during the week, did not play. And so, as you mentioned, Tyler Smith, the 10th rated guard in the league, well, he just played his second straight game at left tackle. And this is what they have to work through. When they started the season with two rookie offensive linemen, they knew there were going to be growing pains. And you also knew at that point that, Tyler Smith is our best left tackle on the team to start the season. But we feel he can be a dominant left guard and arguably one of the top 5 guards in the league. So do we leave him at guard and take the growing pains with Tyler Guyton with the belief that by the end of the season, that's going to be our best offensive line? Or do you go with what's your best offensive line at the moment? And the argument can be made that's Tyler Smith at left tackle and TJ Bass at left guard, which is how they went this past game. Now, again, this past game, that duo held up pretty well in the Pittsburgh game. They got destroyed in the Detroit game against the interior of the Lions' defensive line just took them apart. And Hutchinson did too. You look in that game, Dak Prescott was, even early when he was getting rid of the ball, he was getting rid of it in less than 2 seconds, and they were right down on top of him. I mean, that's why their offense couldn't get going. So, yeah, a big part of their inconsistency as a team is the erratic play on the offensive line. And they have to figure out, okay, are we going to keep Guyton out there and move Tyler Smith back to left guard and just take a few more of these growing pains and feel we're going to get there sooner rather than later? Or at 3-3, with the 2 road games coming up at San Francisco and at Atlanta, which is playing pretty well right now, just say we can't afford that luxury right now. We can't develop these guys in these next 2 games. Our season's right on the line. And that's one of the questions they're going to be discussing, I think, pretty strongly during the bye week.
See, I'm wondering now if it's just a bad idea to think that you're going to draft 2 guys and start 2 rookies in the offensive line. Maybe 1 would have been okay to try to do that, but to do 2 is a little much. I listen.
Well, let me. Can I bring up an analogy here?
No. Let me finish my point, and then you can bring something up. Tyron Smith.
It was a very Jerry Jones way to treat Evan on that. Right there, but sure, go ahead.
I may fire him from this podcast. Tyron Smith, look, and Tyron Smith, one of the all-time great offensive tackles, and yes, he got hurt a lot, and yes, it was time for him to go. I even said it was time for him to go. But let me just say this about that. There was some Twitter chatter that, this was a good reason for him to go because in the game Monday night, he had a holding call and didn't look good. And Pro Football Focus has him rated the 25th tackle with a score of 70.8, which would be better than both the Cowboys tackles now. Now, look, it would have cost you more money to commit to him, and I'm not saying that was the right thing to do, but I'm saying that when you get into these situations like this and you think it's time to turn something over, you're not always going to get what you want from that. And the Cowboys are not getting what they wanted at that kind of situation, and that's how you end up where they can't block for the run and they can't pass block either. All right, so Evan, what was your point?
Well, I mean, let's just draw the analogy to the one area in Dallas sports that's always been the biggest area of futility is Rangers starting pitching. And when you put 2 rookie pitchers in the starting rotation, you're not going to have success. You're hoping that guys grow as the season goes along, but you're not going to have success. And I'd say the same thing applies here. Your 5-man offensive line is the foundation for how your offense is going to operate. It's what frees up the skill position players to do their thing. And if you put 2 rookies in there, you're going to have a significant stretch of growing pains. And I think that's what the Cowboys have. And it leads to this, David, is I think you just brought up a great point. Do you say, okay, let's go with what's going to be the best in the long run? And that means more growing pains. Well, more growing pains probably means more losses early and your season's going to be over. And if what is to be gained is to end up with an effective offensive line by the end of the season, then maybe that's the best thing. Is this offensive line, can it grow this season into a productive offensive line that allows for this team to do stuff, which gets to another question, right? If they're blocking for runners, the runners have to be able to hit holes and create yards. I don't think they've got the runners to do that.
No, I mean, this is a house of cards, right? In the way, or the dominoes are lined up here, and you knock one over, and you see them fall, and that's what the offensive line has always been on the offense, and now it's even more crucial because of all your defensive injuries. You need to control the ball and score points, and yet you're not doing it because your offensive line's inefficient. This is a tough one, and we just talked about this on Tyler Guyton and what they're going to do here, but this is how it's connected as well. I would argue, I think you go back and look at it, Cooper Beebe's 2 worst games have been his last 2 games. Now you're saying, well, he's playing more. He got off to a good start. Why is he playing not as good now? Well, before he had Zach Martin on his right and Tyler Smith on his left. Now Tyler Smith's been kicked outside and he has TJ Bass to his left, who isn't as good as Tyler Smith. So now you're exposing Cooper Beebe in a way you didn't expose him in the first 3 games to compensate for Tyler Guyton. So, but the other side of this is, they are getting Chuma Edoga back. He was hurt early. He was their swing tackle who you could put in there from time to time, and I think they hope he comes back pretty soon, and then they would prefer to keep Tyler Smith at left guard because they're convinced he is dominant there and that he can be a special left guard. But let's see how left tackle unfolds. I just think Guyton needs to show more consistency than what he's shown. What you said about the running is very valid as well. And this gets to something else. People are going, well, yeah, but the passing game and the connection with, CeeDee Lamb and Dak just doesn't look right. Well, what has been one of Dak's most effective tools in his toolbox in his time as a quarterback? Play action. He doesn't have play action with his team. No one respects their run game. They have issues up front and protection. So what, so the thing that has made Dak so efficient in large part throughout his career is just missing. It's gone. And so that's why Dak looks, doesn't look the same right now. So it's a domino effect. And a lot of these dominoes are falling because of the inconsistency and the poor play in the offensive line.
So guys, as we get out of this segment, right, and you've gone through all this stuff, they're sitting here at 3-3. Is the best, most realistic scenario for the Cowboys that they play in an awful division this year, they squeak into the playoffs, and they end up with, in all likelihood, a pretty quick exit? Is that the best case scenario, most realistic best case scenario here?
Well, the best thing for them would be the fact that the expectation would be so low after this season. They get into the playoffs. If they get bounced, it's like, that's what we figured. I'm not saying that would save Mike McCarthy's job, but I do think that it would be different from previous season when you go in 12-5. You're thinking, well, they should go a couple of games. Even when they haven't done it, you still think that was in the back of your mind that was a possibility. But if they get in at 9-8 as into the playoffs, then that's not going to give anybody any inspiration.
No, 9-8. But what if they're healthy? What if they get all their best players? The thing is that in last year, even those 12-5 teams, they were managing or hanging on at the end of the regular season. They weren't playing their best ball. There's a potential for this team to play its best ball, but now I just say that because they looked so bad early. So it's got to get better, right? So you don't want to overstate that either. But yeah, if Tyler Guyton and Cooper Beebe don't develop to a certain point, then all this may bear fruit next year, but it's not going to help this coaching staff or do much for this season.
No. All right, that's going to do it for the Cowboys segment of our podcast. We're going to move over now and talk a little college football. All right, so Evan, I was out at the State Fair the other day for Texas OU. I didn't think that was going to be a great game. I didn't think Oklahoma had it in them, and they did not, although Texas didn't start out well either in that game. And they eventually did, and then it became a rout, 34-3.
I thought Texas did everything it could to allow Oklahoma to make it a game early, and Oklahoma refused to allow that to happen.
Yeah, I just really think it's funny, this whole quarterback situation. It really perturbs me. In this generation, in general, what we've found is that people just believe what they want to believe, and they don't want to look at facts. And I can't tell you the number of people I've seen in and outside the media, in some Oklahoma media even, who felt like that Dylan Gabriel leaving, it was time to move on. He really wanted to go to Oregon and be closer to home. And Jeff Webby left as the offensive coordinator to become the head coach at Mississippi State. And look, you've got this 5-star quarterback in Jackson Arnold and then a 4-star in Michael Hawkins Jr. And these guys got to play. Someone said that to me at the Texas OU lunch on Friday in the media. And I just looked at him and said, they won the Texas OU game last year because of Dylan Gabriel. Dylan Gabriel was a Heisman Trophy contender pretty much all season long. And then Saturday against Ohio State, he throws for 200 yards and 2 touchdowns in the first half of that game, a huge win for Oregon, and now he is the all-time. He's got a combination there that makes him the all-time FBS leader, I believe, in rushing yards and passing yards combined. I don't understand, in college football,
well, people
want
to believe their own narratives, and I think we're in a changing period, Kevin, right? You and I have been back and forth on this, and this is one of the things that I think makes Texas the best team in the country. Certainly the schedule is a big advantage, but you've got an experienced quarterback there. And I don't think you can overestimate the value of an experienced quarterback. And so Oklahoma has turned their season over to two very inexperienced quarterbacks, and that puts them, I think, at a disadvantage from the very start. I don't care how good these guys are in the period of transfer portals and everything. Teams are not together nearly as long as they usually are. And if you've got a group, a unit that has some experience together, you've got a significant advantage on most of the rest of your conference.
Well, you just got to play the guy. This whole thing for me, it used to be like, I'll go back to when Mac Brown had Major Applewhite and Chris Sims, and he was trying to force feed Chris Sims into that system there because this was the first big time quarterback he had signed, and he needed to get him to play. And Major was a good quarterback, but I guess he felt like he wasn't great. And I have to say, I admit, I was on Mac's side just simply because I thought, if you don't play this guy and if he leaves, how are you going to attract any other big time skill position talent that Chris Sims brings? But that was a different time as well. Now is a time where quarterbacks come and go all the time, and you just simply can't count on it. And what you have to do as a head coach is that this guy's the best quarterback I have right now. I'm playing him. And the whole argument that, Brent Venables made when he said, I just assumed he was turning pro. Well, that's idiotic to say that. You need to know what he's going to do. You need to be asking your quarterback every week, how's it going? What can I do for you? Can I come over to your house? Can I help you with your homework? If you've got a great quarterback, you need to keep him as happy as possible to keep him from leaving and going someplace else. So I don't want to talk anymore about that part of it. But Texas did play well, responded well to that. The thing that has surprised me about Texas this year, Evan, is how well their defense has played. They are the number one defense in the nation on several fronts. They're just giving up 6.3 points a game. They've only given up 3 touchdowns in 6 games. That's pretty remarkable to do that. And we can talk about the fact that their schedule has set up well for them. There's no question about that. Georgia has played a tougher schedule, but mostly just because they played Alabama. If you look at the other SEC games they played, it was not a tough schedule so far. And
no, but they opened against Clemson and drummed Clemson, and Clemson has played much better and is a top 10 team now. But I do think, I think that the Georgia schedule taken as a whole is tougher because even after they got out, even after the Alabama game, they were staring at Texas, and after Texas, they're staring at Tennessee. And so it is a tough schedule. The question, and I have not spent nearly as much time familiarizing myself with the Texas roster as I should, but how experienced is that defense? How experienced is that unit?
The team overall is very experienced. It's full of juniors and seniors. Although, you can say Anthony Hill's the best player, and he's just a sophomore. He's a linebacker, and so
But you take a good nucleus and add a really good player.
Yeah, I mean, they're really good. And I wrote this as my follow to that game. This is what Nick Saban was afraid of in 2022 when he came out and complained about Texas A&M's number 1 recruiting class, which didn't work out so well for Jimbo Fisher. But the premise of it holds up, which is that we can't pay like some schools can. They just simply, and that sounds crazy to say that, doesn't it? That Alabama cannot come up with the kind of money that Texas can. And you just assume that because they've been such a power. But, where's all the money in Alabama boosters? There's a lot more money here in Texas boosters. There's no question about that for both A&M and Texas. But for that matter, there's probably more for SMU. I mean, I wouldn't doubt that what we're seeing a little bit of in the transition between SMU and TCU is that SMU has more money in its boosters than TCU does. We've known that for a long time. So
we've known that since 1984.
Yeah. So I do think that that we're starting to see that. This is not something that's going to happen over a 10-year period. It's already happening. We're already starting to see the shift here of what the NIL money has done to transform the landscape a little bit. So Texas is certainly set up well for that. They've got more money than anybody else, probably. And they have in place now a coach who knows what to do with it. I give Steve Sarkisian all the credit in the world for understanding what it took to get a quarterback. We need to have the right quarterbacks. Texas struggled with that for years since Vince Young and Colt McCoy. And we know all those stories about Mac Brown just swinging and missing on quarterback after quarterback and letting people go, offering them as safeties, but not as quarterbacks. Those were real issues for Texas that could have changed certainly their dynamic. And now they are in a position, certainly with, as you mentioned, Quinn Ewers, but not only that, Arch Manning has his backup. There's nobody that has a 1-2 punch at quarterback like that, which is important when your quarterback, Quinn Ewers, has the injury history that he does. So let me ask you this about Carson Beck. He's been mentioned as, one of the top 2 quarterbacks in the nation going into the season. Certainly he and Shedeur Sanders, the 2 most attractive, to the NFL. What's your take on Carson so far?
Yeah, I've not been impressed this year. And I don't know if we're going back to some offensive line issues, or they've got a young running back in Nate Frazier who has some real skills, but is not great on the blocking side yet. And so that's hurt them. But I feel like, especially in the Alabama game, it seemed to me like everything that Beck threw was off his back foot and couldn't make the adjustment to say, okay, I'm going to stay in here and throw properly. And I feel like I've seen that play out again, against Mississippi State in some regards. And he just threw off balance, and it just didn't look like the throws were all that well timed. The question I have is, I feel like, and I'm not as close to the Georgia program as I should be, but I feel like they've got a really good contributor in Dylan Bell, and I don't think they've gotten him involved enough. And I don't know if that, when you get in with a quarterback, there's always the communication issue and how timed up they are and things like that. I'd like to see Georgia involve Dylan Bell a little bit more. But for me, the disappointing thing right now is, as good at athletes as Georgia puts out there on defense, the fact that they have given up the number of points. They gave up 30 points to Mississippi State. Now, part of that was Beck throwing an interception in the end zone that killed one drive. But they gave up back-to-back 75-yard touchdown drives to Mississippi State in the second half, and that's just not been the mark of a Kirby Smart club.
No, Texas beat Mississippi State. They gave up 13 points, 1 touchdown. They gave up, Georgia gave up 31. Those things don't always translate. But I didn't see anything that Mississippi State could do on offense that would make you think they were capable of hanging 31 points on a good Georgia team. I mean,
the quarterback is good and athletic, and but I don't think that they should have been. I don't think that they should have been capable of scoring 31 points.
No, so that's really the closest thing we see so far. If we're going to make comparisons on schedules and what they're doing, it is still a little difficult for me to believe too much in the Texas defense. I think the Texas offense has been good, and we expect them to hang up points in there, and they are doing that. Even when Quinn starts slowly, which he has had a tendency to do that at times, he usually always rebounds and gets going at some point. They've had a pretty good running game. That was one of the concerns they had going into the season, what it would do. Wisner he was very tough in the game Saturday. I thought it was interesting. After the game, he went over 100 yards. And after the game, Steve Sarkisian was asked that question, is he going to be the starting running back now? And basically, Sark just said, no, we're going to still go by committee here. We're going to see who's the hottest and how they play. So that was interesting. I'm not sure what the point of that would be, other than the fact that you're just trying to keep everybody involved. So I do think that Texas will win this game. I was really hoping it was going to be 1 versus 2. That's what it was earlier in the season. That would have really been fun. 1 versus 5 doesn't have quite the same ring to it. But I do think this could be the game of the season. And it's going to be hard to top that Georgia-Alabama game, as crazy as that was, going back and forth. And that is the one thing I'll say about Carson Beck. Yes, he is not playing as well as we thought he was going to play going into the season, but he really hung up some points there at the end of that game against Alabama. It got really wild there. He is capable of playing as well as anybody in the country, and certainly a very dangerous quarterback.
He is. And if Georgia is able to run the ball a little bit and they're able to involve play action, he becomes that much more dangerous. They have not had a great running game the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, that's going to be a real issue for them going forward. The way the rest of the schedule sets up, as we were pointing out about schedules, once they get past Georgia, if Texas can beat Georgia, then there's some trap games in there. Certainly, we can see what Florida does, what Vanderbilt does. I just don't believe that's going to be an issue for Texas. I think the real issue for Texas after Georgia is going to be Texas A&M.
I don't think there are any trap games, to be perfectly honest with you, because I think Texas is the best team in the country, and I think that they are that far ahead of everybody else. The only thing that I would say on the trap game formula is this, and I think I said this last week when we were talking about college football. It just really stuck with me. I guess it was Herb Street that said this a couple of weeks ago and summed it up really well for me, that in this era of the transfer portal and how quickly it has evolved, that the best teams in conferences, particularly in the Power 5, in the Power 4 conferences, are not quite as good as they once were because they've lost that level of depth. And the teams at the bottom of the conference, of those conferences, are much more formidable because they've taken that depth and put it into their starting lineups. So I think there is more parity in college football. You talked to Greg Sankey a little bit about this over the weekend. What was his take on this?
He believes that as well. He had several things, just the things you talked about, the transfer portal and the fluctuation in talent, and you're seeing guys leave and I'll go back to the Oklahoma thing. If you put Dylan Gabriel back in that game Saturday, I don't know that he would have been enough to make up 31 points, but it certainly would have been a much more competitive game than that game was. So,
look, if Oklahoma scores after that early interception, right? If they take that ball, score a touchdown, and all of a sudden get a little bit of momentum in that game, there are two things that you're going to get a good corny dog at the State Fair, and momentum in that game is as huge as any tactical advantage.
Well, sure it is, especially with college players. The lower you go on the totem pole of athletics, the more emotion plays a part. And certainly college football is still a part of that emotional scale. You take away certain players, key players in this situation, and it makes a big difference. That was what this can't be minimized, is the situation that Texas has at quarterback with Archie Manning. Tell me another place in the country where a talent of Arch Manning's talent level, he's just willing to sit there and wait to be the starting quarterback. No place else. There's not another quarterback in the country who do that. I didn't believe that they would both be on the same campus for 1 year, much less 2 years. And so I do think that, after you get to know him a little bit and know his relationship with his grandfather, who he considers his idol, and certainly Archie Manning is one of the great gentlemen who ever played college football, and one of the great players ever played college football, is that this is the kind of people they are. That we're willing to wait for this time. I wouldn't put it past them that Arch ends up playing out his career at Texas just because maybe he'd like to do that. I don't know. He's got a lot of talent and a lot of ability, and I think that certainly Texas fans are waiting on that. Someone asked me, what if Quinn decided he wanted to come back for one more year? I think, first of all, that's not happening. Quinn's Quinn's going to go. I think at this point he's probably a borderline first rounder, and if he needs to stay healthy for the rest of the year to show the NFL that he can play. I mean, he's already missed a couple of games. He didn't really probably need to miss the second one, but he's had some injury issues. He's going to need to show himself to be a little more consistent, to make sure his feet are set when he throws. I still think he has great arm talent, and I still think he has a future in the NFL. I'm not sure what that is, but
he hasn't run as much this year, right?
Well, he doesn't really run much. He will. He's not a dual threat quarterback. So, but
he ran a little bit more the first 2 years, I thought.
Well, there were times when he had to run a little bit, frankly. He's got a good offensive line in front of him. He doesn't need to do that much. That's the difference between him and Arch. Arch is bigger, faster, stronger, better arm. And so what Quinn has over him is his experience and knowing the right reads to make and the right things to do. And so this is a situation where, as I talked about at the top, where Steve Sarkisian has the perfect situation. He has the more experienced quarterback as his starter, as he should be. And he's playing him because he's the better quarterback right now. And one day Arch Manning will be the better quarterback, but by that time, Quinn Ewers will be gone. So this is the perfect situation. And it's, that and the fact that their defense has come so far. And it was pretty good last year. It's better this year. It's a much better defense this year than it was last year. They were they're much better at just keeping people out of the end zone, for one thing. I don't recall the last time I saw Texas with a defense this good. They're really a complete team, certainly the most complete team in the country, I think.
They are. The reason I brought up Ewers and mobility is I do think the one thing that does become a potential wild card in Georgia's favor here is you look at the games in which they've had real issues this year, and it's been against Vandergrift at Kentucky and Milroe and the kid at Mississippi State, I forgot his Van Buren. Yeah. All really mobile quarterbacks who are dual threats. And I think if Georgia can plan that the quarterback is not going to get out of the pocket and not going to turn that into a big game, I think their defense becomes a lot more dangerous. So that's the one thing I would keep an eye on in this game that could be a real wild card.
Yeah, that's always a wild card for me. I prefer a quarterback, especially in college, who can move a little bit. And I'm sure that's what, Texas fans look at too. Look, they won a national championship with Vince Young. He was better when he was running than he was when he was throwing. And he wasn't bad when he was throwing his last year there. It just always, it's a wild card for any team to have to prepare for, right? And in college football, that's the issue. I hate to make this whole podcast about offensive lines, but it is so hard to put together an offensive line in the NFL where you had guys for years and years and years. In college football, you got them for, all these guys in that offensive front. There used to be a formula where if you had 100 starts between, these 4 or 5 offensive linemen, you were doing great.
But that just gets back to what we said at the top of the segment, right? Texas is one of the most experienced teams in college football, guided by an experienced quarterback. And I think that gives them a significant edge. Obviously, the talent is great, and the schedule is favorable. And so I think I said to you this weekend, I think Sunday I texted you that Texas is the best team in college football, and I don't think it's all that close.
Well, we'll see. As you know, the schedule has been pretty favorable to them. Michigan was not great. Oklahoma was not great, but they're good teams. And going up and playing in the big house and winning up there and dominating like they did, that was something. And of course, we saw this is not just this year. Last year, we saw what Quinn Ewers did when he went into Tuscaloosa and beat a very good Alabama team.
Yep.
There. So he's played in big games, and that's the thing you like, right? He's played in a national semifinal game. He's played in Tuscaloosa. He's played in Ann Arbor. He played in the Big 12 championship game, won that. He's done all those things. I know that people criticize him in the semifinal game. He didn't play great, but he was about inches away from pulling off a win over Washington in that semifinal game. I still think that A.D. Mitchell could have gone up for that ball. Didn't really fight for it. And people said, well, he should have thrown a different kind of pass. It's like you're putting a lot on that quarterback. The two things to do, throwing it is harder than catching it. So I think that we've been hard on Quinn Ewers, the public in general. I think he's been a pretty good quarterback for Texas, and he's won a lot of big games for them. So we'll see what happens on Saturday.
Your opinion would not change at all if you were the father of a wide receiver as opposed to the father of a quarterback.
Yeah. No, I was always saying, no, look, I've always said it is harder to throw it than it is to catch it. I mean, people don't understand that. It is really difficult, especially when you got big, fast people chasing you. So that's going to do it for our podcast this week. We thank you for coming in. We'll be back next week to talk about what happened in this Texas-Georgia game. And
well, if both of us get through the traffic on the way home from the F1 and Texas-Georgia over the weekend.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't decided whether I'll drive back after the game. I usually do that. I'm always keyed up after games anyway. And what the heck? It's 3 hours. I'll go ahead and just drive on back. I always leave myself the out. And as I'm driving back, maybe if I got really tired, I'll just stop in Waco or who knows where and just spend the night there. But
well, there you go.
That always seems like it's such a drag.
We're making a full weekend of this. This is going to be quite the house divided. I am taking my UT stepdaughter Natalie to the game, and I am sure she's going to be yapping at me the whole time. But most importantly, we've made dinner reservations on Friday and brunch reservations on Sunday, and that's what we're really looking forward to.
Ah, there you go. Where are you going?
I think on Friday night we're going to Perla's.
Very
and
nice.
On Sunday, she has made a reservation at a place called Bar Peached.
I have not heard of Bar Peached.
She was a big fan when she was in school there. So,
all right, excellent. Well, that'll be fun. Have fun down there, and maybe I'll run across you. So
maybe
maybe from everybody in here to everybody out there, thanks, and we'll see you next time.